Hello listeners, and welcome to another week on Chasm Converses. This week I have Dolly Dagger joining me. She's a frontwoman, singer, songwriter, originally from Victoria, but now lives in Los Angeles. And she finds herself back in Victoria for a very special show, launching her newest single, Tower. And we talk about this song throughout the episode. And you're hearing the song right now, so do add it to your playlists. But after you've listened to the podcast episode, of course. Our discussion is a must-listen for musicians, especially those looking to travel overseas, or even base themselves overseas, or even getting into music scenes over in other countries. Dolly has such an incredible insight into being a creative musician when it comes to songwriting, creating videos and playing shows, and she just drops absolute fire and facts throughout this episode. So please, join us, and let's get conversing. Chasm Converses. Dolly Dagger, welcome to Chasm Converses.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So awesome to have you here, and it's also really great to meet you as well.
Likewise.
You're in Melbourne right now. I'm in Adelaide. Just recently, you came down from LA to be back here.
That's right. Yeah. Landed Easter Sunday.
Oh, wow. That recently. That's awesome.
Yeah. Straight into the chocolate eggs, honestly.
Yeah, and the heat. The chocolate eggs and the heat, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, it was nice. It was really good to kind of be here. It was sunny. We kind of land in the morning and just try to stay awake for the day. So lots of activities going on with the family, which was helpful to stay awake.
That's so cool. And so you were born in Australia, and so you live over in LA now. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So I have born in Victoria, lived in Victoria my whole life, and then moved over to LA after my last band broke up in Melbourne. And then I just decided, I'm going to start again. I'm going to start again over there. So I kind of went over and, just kind of sussed out the music scene, went to a couple of meetups and hangs and got to meet a few people. And I traveled a couple of times beforehand. And then I decided that I was going to give it a little shot to live there. And I found the lifestyle to be super fun and just kind of really, really conducive to making music and super creative. And so I just stayed there, and all of a sudden, time has flown by and here I am. But, I come back once or twice a year, which is really cool too, to be able to come home and hang out and see my friends still playing music. I went out last night and saw a few friends' bands playing at Revolver in Melbourne. And
hell yeah.
It's really good to just kind of be back with those people and not lose touch with home,
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's quite a bit of a fear I guess you can have when you do kind of move somewhere else, that when you come back for visits every now and then, you might have that sort of fear of maybe, because obviously the friends have gone and done different things over that period of time that you've been away for. And obviously yourself is also, you've done that as well. I had a similar thing because I was in London last year for about a year. And then I came back mid-December last year, and I had that same sort of thing where it's you come back and everything is sort of just it's just shifted ever so slightly because people have been doing their thing over the last year and you've been overdoing your thing. So it's it takes a bit of transitioning too, I'm sure. How did it feel sort of going over to LA from Melbourne, because there's such different places and cities and different people and all that kind of stuff? How did you adjust to that?
Yeah, I went in really gung-ho, to be quite honest, and I was just I'm going to make a record and I'm going to put out music and I'm going to do all this stuff, and I did all that stuff and nothing happened. So you go in thinking, that this magical place is going to do this magical thing. And you learn pretty quickly that it's a lot more, just hard work. It's obviously you need to put the effort in and meet people properly and make friends. And you don't get to just kind of walk in there and, get everything handed to you on a silver plate. That's yay, you made it to LA. Here's everything you ever wanted. It's got that illusion. And it does feel like it can be that way sometimes, but it's really getting into the community of musicians there and people has been super eye-opening as work ethic and just getting, committing to your projects and making sure that you just keep writing them out and stay true to yourself and that type of thing, which is really cool. And I really love the connection that we have with LA and Sydney and Melbourne. And I think these hubs of major music being
Mm.
major cities, LA is a pretty accessible place for a lot of music industry people, and
Mhm.
APRA is over there, which is really great because
Oh,
they have a lot of resources for us Aussie artists that are living in America, and then they have meetups, and we get to kind of, get to see more and meet more Australian, New Zealand artists or writers or producers that are living in LA, and it does feel very community,
incredible.
which is just, it's really cool. Like, I think people, if you haven't been, it can seem very disconnected and far away, but it's very connected, and I
Yeah.
really like that about it.
That's so cool. I mean, especially because it's such a great thing to see Australian artists like kind of branch out and take the liberty to go and try and relocate in a different state or a different country altogether. For
Yeah.
music, especially like because I mean sometimes it's you can move there for jobs or just for a change from the Australian culture, but to go over there with a project in mind and doing it for a certain thing, in this case music, it's
Hmm.
incredibly admirable, and a lot of people I think also don't understand how difficult it can be to sort of go and just sort of, as you say, put your all into it, just go gun ho into a new place and just be like, "Yep, we're gonna do this." As I said, I did the exact same thing overseas in London, and it was
Yeah.
the same sort of deal where it's kind of like, "Oh yeah, so like this is where everything is," and you try and find where all the spots are for the music and all the spots are for this, that, and wherever. And yeah, there are a little bit of there's some expectations that you kind of have around it, I think, as well. But I think that's just like the naiveness that you kind of go in there with when you do go to a new place, and then you learn pretty quickly that
Yeah.
instead, like you take some work to get going and to meet new people and to get build connections, because it's hard to build connections straight away when you've just landed somewhere brand new.
Yeah, but it is exciting. I'm really glad that you got that opportunity too, and to be able to do that in London. It's another music hub for
Mm,
everybody. And I've had lots of friends from LA move over there to London,
mm.
even just for a small period of time, just to meet people. And, like, great that you got to have that experience. But I think it is that, the word of advice from me would be to enjoy the first 6 to 12 months,
Mm.
getting, unless you've already built some contacts over there, to begin with before you move.
Hmm.
If you kind of go there with a small network, then spend the time working on that and spend the time just integrating and being part of the scene in the community, because then at that point you have the lay of the land a little bit more, and you understand how it all operates and works, which isn't particularly different from
Mm.
Melbourne or Sydney or any other major city in Australia, or probably around the world as well. But once you start working in the industry, you start to see how small it is, and
Yeah.
how we all help each other, and how we all connect in some way and keep the industry going as a whole. So it's a really positive experience, I think, between all the different countries and people from different countries we're all doing the same thing. We all have the same mission at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And that's such great advice for, just any Australian artist or any artist in particular that just wants to go overseas and travel and try and build themselves another hub in a different country or that kind of stuff. So no, it's
Yeah.
that's very sound advice. Like that's really wonderful. I would love to go into talking to you about your music and all that kind of stuff, because I really enjoy it. I love the fact that you've got a new single coming out on Wednesday, which
Yep.
is, my goodness, so exciting. And you did so much last year as well, because you had an EP come out late last year as
Yep.
well. So like
That's
you've just
right.
been going and going and going and putting it all out. So
Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly exciting. I'd love to know, just before I go into all that kind of stuff, like who are your sort of musical influences that you sort of I guess take inspiration from, that sort of stuff when it comes to building your music? Because especially with Tower, when I first heard it, I was like, man, there's a bit of like a 2000s kind of like hard rock sort of vibe in this song, which I was not expecting, but it was a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I think it's a result as well of just putting us all of myself, my guitarist, and our co-writer and producer for that one in the room, and everyone's influences started to seep out just a little bit. Jesse kind of came in with this riff, which he had sent me maybe 2 days before, and I listened to it, and I kind of didn't think much of it. I thought,
Mm,
yeah, it's catchy, it's cute, it's cool, I like it, but it didn't grab me the way some of our other riffs have. And
mm,
he played it for Louis though, and Louis immediately heard the drums to it because he's a drummer, so he went straight in, and then
mm,
it started taking a little bit more shape, and that really quickly then started to influence how I was feeling about it. And for some reason, like Nine Inch Nails came to mind right away, as far
mm.
as like the vibe of the chorus, and then just the way some of the guitars were working in between each other. And I think that maybe dictated just a little bit, but it is always funny how we interpret these little licks of music, because I might sing something and show Jesse, or even like show him some synth or some keys or something, a little melody, and he will get a different sense of what that is. He'll maybe throw it to a band I've never heard of or didn't listen to growing up, and I'll do the same, and I'll say, oh, this sounds very similar to this and this, and he's like, oh, I've never heard that before. So it's really interesting how all these little things bleed out of us when we're writing, but they're not on purpose, you know. So I'm happy to hear the interpretation from you of like what you pick up and then what other people pick up from songs. I always find that so interesting as to how we interpret these songs and how we interpret those melodies.
Yeah, it sort of like feeds into each other from, like, as you say, the different genres sort of just feed into like the one sort of thing, and it becomes something just completely like, just a bit of like an anomaly of a song that you have, which is just like, it's great. And like a few of your songs are like that as well, which I kind of like. You can see like the outside influences that sort of come in, and it's nice because it kind of just brands it and it creates something that's basically just unique to itself, rather than being like a carbon copy of a song of this nature or of this nature. I think in that way, it's quite cool that, as well as with that, you then like, brand, I guess, the song with your own sort of influences outside of like what the song sounds like as well. Like, whether it's, like the Nightmare song where like it's like a heist sort of thing, and like the guys go around with the guns. Those guns are sick. I love those little light up guns. That got me. But like, and you just sort of, you put your own influence, your own branding on it, which is it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's funny as well. I think we're such products of our environment. I think at that time it was kind of summer and it was kind of hot. And for some reason, my mind always goes to the X-Files when that's the kind of weather, because I think I just remember like watching reruns with my dad when I was a kid, and it was like in the middle of summer holidays or something maybe, and we're up late watching X-Files when we shouldn't be and scaring ourselves and that kind of thing. So it was just funny. I think the weather triggered me to watch X-Files that had just kind of maybe come out on one of the streaming services. And so I was going really deep into that, and we were doing the song and making videos, and that's what popped in my mind. Okay, I want to tell this story. I'll do this story that's got kind of like this nightmare situation, or it represents feeling stuck or whatever. But it's just funny that like that's what I felt like at the time, because that's what I was watching at the time. So, but someone might not watch that video and immediately think of X-Files. It might not be what they think of. They might think of something else. So it's just funny though, like how we get in these little places in our lives where we're listening to a particular type of music or watching a particular show, maybe reading a book, and that influences our own creativity. And, we've spent all of our lives kind of absorbing from other artists and bands, and maybe it's not even music that influences a song that you're writing, but maybe it's just lyrics, or it's a feeling of something in the first place. So it's fun because we never really sit down and write anything on purpose. Everything we write, and I think from what I've noticed, a lot of our friends and other bands that we know are very much the same. I think there's a lot of discussion all the time of, oh, these bands are ripping off that band, or that band sounds like this band, or whatever else. But really, I think as far as I know, a lot of bands are just sitting down and writing a good song. And that's our motto, is just write a good song. If it does end up sounding like something that someone can pinpoint, then that's just how it happened. Maybe it's come from something you've heard at some point, or maybe the artist that it sounds similar to was influenced by the same bands you're influenced by. So, you grow up in a particular era. We're all listening to the same bands. Like, I'm a huge Deftones fan, but Jesse isn't a huge Deftones fan. But it comes out of me in the way that I sing, or the way that I write, or the way I play, and whatever his influences. I mean, he's a big Beatles guy, and I was never really a big Beatles person. So, my parents were a little bit more of the Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple persuasion, Jimi Hendrix, like that. That was my era. So it's just interesting how all of those interplay together to create this genre of whatever the hell it is that we are. I don't even know, but that's the fun part of it, I think, is letting that creativity come out of you in whichever way it comes out and not stopping it in any way, even if it might sound similar to something. Obviously, there's copyright. Like if there's something that's too similar, I think at the end of Feels Like Fiction, the final outro of that sounded exactly like a Britney Spears song. And I was singing it and Jesse was like, that's Britney Spears. You can't do that. And I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even like think about it.
I'm sure I heard that song.
I listened back. When I listened back, I was like, oh, I guess so. I don't even listen to, like, you know, we all know her and we know her songs, but I don't own a record. I never bought a Britney Spears CD. So it just was in there because it was in my mind somewhere, I guess. But we had to change it.
That's like the one song that I haven't heard because I was like, I was going through like the Spotify. So I'll listen to that later and I'll put my own interpretation on it and be like, all right. Because I mean, I was basically brought up on like 2000s pop as well. So like that's something that I would just click straight away. I mean, I had like, my dad had like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin influence together. So like we had that sort of thing all growing up as well. But no,
I think it's all there, right? Like we all, our parents influence us, our siblings, you know, cousins, even kids at school. It's just like we don't get to control that sometimes. These things just make their way in.
Yeah, and it's such a great thing with music, especially because it goes through different eras and that sort of stuff as well. So like, I mean, even in the present day, you know, with, you know, a lot of my friends have like, you know, kids now and that kind of stuff. And I even think to myself some days, like, man, those guys are going to grow up with such different influences to what we had when we grew up. But then for our parents, it's the same thing. It's the exact same mentality. Like, you know, when they grew up, it's like, well, my granddad listened to like, you know, the 1940s and 30s, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And now it's like, you know, everyone's got their own little sort of differences in what music they kind of grew up with, but especially in the most recent times, especially when with these interviews that I have with a lot of musicians, it's so nice to see such uniqueness still coming out of like people's genres and things that they like to listen to, especially when it comes to genres that you can't even really express what it is. Like, you know, it's because there's so many subgenres of like of a thing right now, so it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. But it's so cool that, you know, a lot of people, especially like your music itself, is just, it's unique to you in the way that it's like, oh, wow, I can't really pinpoint a lot of bands this sounds exactly like, because this is kind of something new. And it's great that a band of like, you know, today's modern era can still come up with unique sounds that's unique to them, to the point where I'm like, man, like I can't actually put a name to what this is, but that's exciting. It's like, cool. It's like, let's come up with a name for it or something like that.
Exactly. Well, if you think of some of our favorite bands growing up and then what their favorite bands were, and it's a generational thing, is that maybe the bands of the 90s were influenced by bands of, say, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then the bands of the 2000s are influenced by, you know, 80s, 90s, 2000s, even early 2000s. Like, it's interesting how that then plays into the future of music, because at some point it's just like this centipede of influence where it's like, okay, so, you know, there's Nirvana, which is the easy go-to to think of right now on the moment, but then you think of the bands in the early 2000s that were influenced by that, and then you've got the bands of now that are influenced by the bands of 2000s. They're kind of in a way, in a roundabout way, also influenced by Nirvana, because that band wouldn't exist in the 2000s without the Nirvana influence, right? So it's the way it all kind of rolls in together. Like it's all been done, it's all happened. It's just the different interpretation. And I think that's what makes art so fun and unique, because maybe it's similar, but it's not exact. It's that person's version of that thing that we liked to begin with. And I think it's really great in the sense that, like, I want 20 bands that sound like the Deftones, and I will love all of them, you know? I want 5 Paramore bands. I want to hear all of the, like, bands influenced by those other bands, because I love that music. And so I really enjoy hearing the way that a lot of artists today are making their version of what they grew up on that was also influenced by earlier music. And because it's recorded history, we have access to hundreds of years of music, or thousands even at this point. Like, we get to go back and listen to these things, and it's there for us to enjoy. And in some way, even if we know it or not, subconsciously, these things come out of us.
Yeah, that is like probably one of the best things about having the streamings and that kind of stuff, and the fact that you can go back and listen to just anything you wanted from just, I mean, hell, I was literally listening to 1950s the other day, and I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
like, you can go back and listen to all this kind of stuff. Like, you can
yeah.
throw just, you've got just the archive is at your hands. Oh, on another note of that, I've noticed there's still so many cool, like, there's so many like Nevada shirts still that I'm seeing every day, just like popping up, and it's like, hell yeah, like I'm happy. That band is just like they're just timeless. Like there's always different generations of people just wearing their stuff. I hope that the people who are wearing the shirts know that it is a band, because sometimes there's that
Yeah.
going in. But even so, it's such an incredible thing to just see that like a band like that is still just
Mhm.
like, not active, not releasing any new stuff, but it's just become like a
Yeah.
legacy that people
Yeah.
just
And
dig
now
right
like
into.
our 2000s music is the legacy. We've got
Mm.
like Paramore. We were
Yeah.
kids at the same time, and they've now become re-popular again with today's younger generation.
Mm.
And it wasn't a phase, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
like we can say that now for sure, for
Yes.
real, because it's really good music, and it's like at the time we were all told, oh, this alternative rubbish or
Mm.
this, emo stuff or whatever
Yeah.
isn't good. It's not gonna last. But here we are. It's one of the, biggest resurgence of genres that we've seen, and I love that because that's what I grew up on. So
Yeah.
I love to see it. It's inspiring that those things have stuck around, and we're getting so many. I don't care what anyone says, there are
Mm.
so many cool new bands coming out that write really excellent music, and
Mm.
we're lucky. It's just people have to look for it.
Exactly. It's one of those things where there's just so many now, because you can be in a band. Like you can do, like, people can be in bands these days. People can not even be in bands and still make music that sound like they're in a band.
Yeah.
Like, obviously back in the day, like you had heaps of bands, but you didn't see them all because you didn't see everything back in the day. But these days you see basically
Hmm.
everything. So it's kind of
Yep.
like everyone's got all the same stuff out all at the same time. So it's hard to kind of filter through and see everything. But it's one of those things that, I always have this thought, especially when it comes to new bands. It's like, the bands of today, like they'll be popular and that kind of stuff, but there's always going to be a better band tomorrow. There's always going to be a better band. Same with, like, I mean, I have the same thing with like acting and that kind of stuff as well. Like, actors who are amazing today, in 20 years, they're going to need new actors like that in 20 years. So it's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
if you don't have like if you don't have your hand in the pit to like be like, here's what I can do, then you'll never have that chance to possibly have your stuff heard
Yeah.
or selected and that kind of stuff. But if you keep putting stuff out and just doing what you want to do, something, people might catch on, people might start seeing all the stuff and might start listening to all the stuff, and it can slowly but surely start happening, and you never know unless you put your hand
Yeah.
in there and sort of get it going. So that's also what's
Yeah.
quite exciting about this, like about the modern day especially.
Totally. And I think it is important that bands make money for their art in some
Mm.
way and they're able to sustain their careers. But in the same capacity, there was a time where we didn't make music for the sake of money.
Mm.
We made music to share, to enjoy,
Mm.
to express just for fun, and it wasn't about money.
Yeah.
So at some point, we have to remember that music's free. It has always been free for
Mm.
us to make as humans, and they've been making it since
Yeah.
there was tribes.
Yeah.
There were in the cavemen's days. I don't even know, like Neanderthals, I'm sure had a beat to something.
Yeah.
So the recorded music industry and selling music as a commodity is a relatively new thing in the grand scheme of humanity. So we
Mm.
have to remember as well that at some point it was free and just something that we shared and enjoyed as people or in communities. So
Incredibly. That's yeah. So that's just, yeah, I couldn't say it any better myself. That's a very good way of putting it. I would love to jump in to more about yourself.
for
Um,
sure.
because you've got yourself the Dolly Dagger band, all the songs, that sort of
Hmm.
stuff. You mentioned before that you were in a band previous to this one, and then once that
Yeah.
band broke up, you decided that you were going to go over to LA and give it your
Hmm.
best try. So I'd love to know, back from like the earlier days, because obviously you're the singer, songwriter, um,
Hmm.
how your progression was when you first started to sing and songwrite, and then you sort of found yourself in a band. Did you sort of like, was it like an easy road to get to that kind of spot, or was it sort of like, was there a lot of hardships and that sort of thing? Take me through that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I think a hardship was when my band broke up because we
Mm.
were younger, things in life changed, people wanted to do other things and explore traveling, or like, getting out of school to go traveling, and they're getting partners and wanting to kind of experience being an adult, and being in a fully functioning band that was trying to be part of the machine, I guess, in some way, costs money. So it is a sacrifice you make at some point, that if you're an independent band, then you need to figure out how you're paying for that. And that was always the challenge of trying to find like a life balance. Obviously, when I was a kid, it didn't matter. I was like 14 and my parents are driving me around to an open mic night. So that's relatively cheap, apart from maybe some new guitar strings and some gas money. But when you start to like make a decision, and I think you either have a parent that's helping somebody out if they're younger. Maybe there's Disney kids that we see a lot of in America. Maybe talent show people. They might have something behind them in terms of financial aid. But once you decide to be in a band as a non-funded adult, it does take sacrifice, and there are things that we choose to do to continue making music. And I think the hardships are trying to find a balance, obviously, of living your life and having a career in some way, but also being able to afford to live, which is where obviously making money comes in for your art and your music, which is super helpful. But the hardships itself is like, relatively minimal, and it is a chosen pain.
Yes, it is very much a chosen pain.
Choose to do it. So I could easily back out anytime and stop trying to sell my music, right? I can still make it. I could still write music that will never stop or change. That is a part of me. I've done it since I was a kid. I made music for a very long time without anyone needing to hear it. It was just in my room by myself. There's hundreds of songs that I've written that no one's ever heard before. And I think many artists and musicians are in the same boat, where they have files and papers and things everywhere of recorded music or just written songs that no one's ever going to hear. And that's just part of being a musician. That's what we do. So that part never turns off, and I don't think it ever would. But making music it costs a lot of money these days. So we do that, and we make the decision to do it, and then we find a way to make it happen, whether it hurts us or not. And occasionally it can, because you put your heart and soul into it, and the results you get back aren't what you expected. But that's the management of expectations that then you need to kind of find for yourself, and be happy and comfortable with that you gave it a shot and you did what you could. And I'm grateful for every listener, every person that buys something. I try not to get too upset about anything, or look too hard upon myself for things that don't or may not work, and just keep going. It's what we do.
No, 100%. And like it's always hard when like a band of a long time kind of breaks up, because then it's kind of like you get thrown into a bit of a tailspin of shit. What do I do? I mean, my band of 9 years broke up in the end of 2022, and then the next year I went to London. So it's like, you've got those little and that's like not just me, that's like 5 members right there that are like, oh shit, like what do we all do? And so
changes your life.
It does, it really does. And it kind of especially when you've been in that circle and that thing for so long, and now you're out of it, you sort of, you start to really kind of be like, wow, this is a big part of my life that's now disappeared. What else can I do, or what can I do to sort of like, not fix this, but still get the same sort of thing that I wanted within this band that I now have to sort of get through myself. And like, it's a very difficult place sort of to be in. But then again, like, being able to step outside your comfort zone in the respect of, I guess, like both of us going overseas and just being like, let's just fucking go over here, because, what's there to lose? There's more going on over here. There's opportunities here and there. So, and the thing is, you don't know about those until you go and you try them. So sometimes you just got to go all out and be like, I'm just going to fucking go over there and just see what happens, and, make the best of the situation. And it's really cool that, you've been able to do that overseas. And it's great that you've been able to like release a lot of music overseas as well as then come back over here to like, then still promote it where you obviously were born and raised. That's incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, we are so connected regardless of where we are. I could make music in any country and release it anywhere, because it gets all released on the same day in each territory. So it's just depending on the time zone. But, it's set for the 10th of whatever at midnight. And it's as soon as it strikes midnight in each territory, it's out. So It's interesting just the thought of how we're able as musicians to still create and put this music out no matter where we are. I think back in the day that there was a little bit more territorial things of like each continent, or the Australian release versus the American release, and now we're all just at the same time, same day, if not sometimes ahead. It's out here in Australia before it's out in America because our time zone comes up first. So
it does.
It's just interesting that the change of that, and how we can do this from anywhere. We can, if we're doing this, we can create it, record it, wrap it up, put it out, and release it on the internet, and we can exist and live anywhere. And that's what I really love, because I love traveling. I love getting to be able, I'm lucky. I know how lucky I am to be able to go back and forth. And it's not on a whim. I'm not rolling around in cash to be fly. As soon as a cheap flight, I've got that like a Google flight alert that comes up if something goes, on a cheap sale. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I can go and visit family, or maybe I can pop over and try and play a show or something. So but regardless of where I am, whether it's here or there, and I have a lot of Aussie friends in America. I never want to lose touch with home, or with what that means to me. So.
No, of course. I'd love to finish off by talking a little bit about Tower and about the music video that you have for it, because it is an awesome watch. You have such a great idea, eye, and concept for music videos that I'm very, very I don't want to say jealous of, but it's just awesome. It's just so cool. You put so much effort into it, and so much into the visuals and all the rest of it. And I love the medieval feel of this one, especially when I saw the sword fighting, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Congratulations with that. Was this a big project to sort of bring it all together? Because it looked like there was a lot into it. There's a lot involved in it.
Yeah, I think so. When we wrote the song, which was kind of late last year, hearing the first riff was we're kind of just getting through the session and we're writing the song. We get to the point where we're thinking about guitar solos and a little bit more embellishment, and things are getting really heavy. And this went a lot heavier than I expected, but all of us expected. But it got to the point where Jesse was ripping this guitar solo, and in my head, I just saw him on top of a tower with flames and a dragon, and it wasn't me. I didn't choose this. It came to me, it popped in my mind, and I said, I've got the music video right there, at least one element of it.
It's an epic guitar solo. Guitar solo.
Yeah. And I kind of just went to Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton version of Alice in Wonderland, and she slays the Jabberwocky. And I think as well, I'd seen a lot of medieval types of things just kind of coming through the ether, whether it was on Pinterest. Medieval knights is a really big thing in America, and that always pops up on my TikTok for some reason. So I always see the horses and the swords and stuff. And I had just watched The Wheel of Time on Amazon.
Right, okay, so it's all feeding into you.
It just kind of happened that way, and I came up with the concept, and I knew I wanted Jesse and the guitar solo and all that stuff, but the knights and the armor and the swords all kind of came to me, and I wanted it to be a real castle outside in on location, but I just couldn't really find anything in the budget. I did look at coming home and doing it at Cryle Castle, which is a castle in...
That's right.
They do festivals and stuff there
in
sometimes.
Ballarat, yeah?
In Ballarat, yeah. And I was like, and my dad knew someone that had built a little recycled castle out of glass bottles and concrete in not far from our hometown.
Wow, okay.
So I was trying to think about doing that, but timeline-wise, we had to get the video finished before I could make it to Australia. So
yeah, right.
It became a deconstructed version of that, where we used the projector and we used these images that I had found or created it was a bit of photoshopping. It was a little bit of taking, one of them is 3 videos layered on top of each other and mushed together. I just kind of put them all in Premiere Pro, layered them, changed the colors, changed a few things, and then used that in the projected scenes. And then some of it is, I found on Shutterstock or something, and I just purchased the image of the castle or whatever it was that I needed, and I knew that would set the scene. And then our lighting director is the one that really kind of like tipped off the edge of that, where it felt like it blended in together, or having it come together with our DP was just kind of the magic of the day. It all looked really good in theory. We had a couple of test shoots, and it all looked really good on paper, and how we envisioned it to look. And we did, kind of test shoot a little bit, but on the day, it was really when it all kind of came together, and we made these decisions to go with that direction. And we had 8 scenes to get through, so we did kind of zoom through with all the costume changes and all the scene changes, and there was a lot of fighting with the projector to get the aspect ratios right, and just kind of figuring out lighting, all that kind of stuff. So
there's so much that goes into it. Hey, like it is literally like a small project that just takes time, and there's so many little elements that you have to get right and all the rest of it. But like, hell, you did a really good job with it, because it looks just so crisp. And like, even like the costumes and stuff, like, you've done really well with that. Like, I think a lot of people are really going to dig this video, as well as like, the song itself. And I mean, I guess this is the first release of you for the year, but I suppose after seeing last year, there's probably a whole lot more that you're probably going to be putting out this year as well.
Awesome. We're working away.
Oh my goodness.
Definitely more to come.
Yeah, no, 100%. I really hope that there is. Well, this has been an amazing chat, Dolly. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your family day to have a chat with me about your new song Tower.
Of course.
And I hope that's, you have a wonderful trip back to LA eventually. I hope you have a wonderful show that you've got going on in Melbourne as well. I hope that goes just wonderfully.
Thank you. Yeah.
And to all the fans and stuff, do stream the song Tower and do listen, watch the music video, and just be captivated by the medieval scenes and by the sword fighting, and just by all the work that's been put into it, because it really is a bit of a work of art, in my opinion.
Thank you so much.
But I wish you all the best in the rest of your musical journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caden. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode this week. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Dolly and myself. Go check out her newest single, Tower, and give her a follow on the socials to keep up to date with everything that she has going on. There's links in the description of this episode where you can find all of her music, videos, and info on upcoming shows. As for myself, follow me on Instagram or YouTube at This Is Chasm, where you can find reels from my podcast episodes and even some extended clips. You can also keep up with the podcast on Spotify, as well as the Chasm Converses playlist, which features all the intro songs from all of my guests thus far. Tower has recently been added, so give it a follow and a listen to support the podcast and the artists. And finally, please leave a rating and or review for the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'll see you next week for a new episode with a new guest here on Chasm Converses.